So for instance, like a thyroid, when conventional medicine looks at it, they look at a TSH marker. So they look at the brain's conversation with the thyroid. So that's like up here. And it's, it's a helpful marker. But if that's good, they're like, all right, we're not going to look at anything else. And you're like, wait, hold on. But how's the thyroid communicating with the body? Like we only looked at like this half. And the reference range for that TSH is from a 0 to 10 scale. And conventional medicine will often say it's normal if it's under a 5. Some providers, if it's under like a 4 or a 3. In functional medicine, if someone is in the 2 range and they're experiencing symptoms, like for a low thyroid, it's like constipation and dry skin and your hair is falling out, you're losing a third of your eyebrows, your weight loss resistance or weight gain, low energy, like we'd be like, those are thyroid symptoms. Like you're cold, your butt is cold in particular. It's a funny thyroid thing. Like you're just like cold all around. Yeah. But we'd be like, all right, so this TSH is like a 2.5. So, that's not sounding off many alarms, but it's enough for us to think about, all right, so that's the brain yelling at the thyroid as that number gets up. So if that number gets to a 3, a 4, a 5, a 10, the brain's like, thyroid, like do your job. Like, why are you not doing your job? But in functional medicine, we don't want to wait until the thyroid's like jumping out of your neck and running down the street screaming bloody murder. We want to like get in there to be like, can we calm it down? Like what's going on? Right. So then we look at 5 more, we could look at more, but there's like generally like 5 additional markers that'll tell us about the conversation from the thyroid, which I keep pointing here because this is where your thyroid is in the front of your neck, to your body. To say like, all right, how is it communicating with the gut and the energy in your cells and the motility, the speed of everything in your body, the speed of your hair growth, the speed of the hydration of your skin, the speed of motility in your gut, the speed of your energy production. And that's where then we get to use the tools. We get to use nutrition. We get to use lifestyle. We get to use supplements to like gracefully help you and your thyroid and your whole body like kind of move. But we also want to say like, oh, well, what's your cortisol doing? Right. Because if your cortisol's off the charts, your thyroid's like, we're running from a bear. And like, digestion's not that important right now. So if you're constipated, like whatever, we're going to climb up in this tree and hide from this bear. So it makes sense when we start to put all the pieces together and we start to then paint this picture of like, what's going on with this person? And then we start to look at, all right, well, what's their work life? How's their sleep? How is their nutrition? Are they under eating? Because then their thyroid's like, there's not enough fuel coming in. There must be a famine. Right. So it starts to make sense when we have the information as opposed to like thyroid medication, see you in 6 months.
Yeah, I think the other side is very quick to just want to push pills, give you medication, fix it, rather than thinking, is there maybe a less intense or less harsh route for the body that we can take to just help correct this, But I am curious, while we're sort of on the topic, thyroid was definitely something I was thinking of, but I'm curious for you, are there a certain set of labs that you recommend women in our 30s get or that you like to see and check that maybe aren't on your standard annual lab work,
Yeah. I think from, let's say the first ones that I would say are like, you're in conventional medicine and you're like, listen, can I just have a conversation with my PCP, my like primary care? Like, what could they help me to do? I would want to see kind of your like comprehensive blood panel. So we're kind of seeing like a metabolic panel. We want to be looking at like, what's your blood glucose, your hemoglobin A1C, and then an additional marker that's not often run is a fasting insulin. So that's going to tell us about blood sugar, in particular about the hormone that lets blood sugar into your cells. That's insulin. So that's really where like any type of blood sugar issues, that's where they first start. And we want that to be like on average, like a 6 to an 8. The reference range for that goes, I think it's like up to like a 27 or something. Wow. So we can see like, wow, there's a lot of dysfunction that can happen in that reference range when we know where we want it to be. So that's like a first inkling of anyone that might be. So anyone with like hormone issues, like PCOS in particular, there's often a metabolic like blood sugar piece to it. So any of my ladies and men, that's definitely a marker we want to look. Is there any like simmering metabolic stuff going on? So that's like kind of your blood sugar panel. Now, sometimes these conversations with providers, you ask for a fasting insulin and they're like, that's not a test that we're going to run. And you're sitting there like, this is really uncomfortable. And like, can I argue with them? Do I know what I'm talking about? So that's a little bit where I question, like, is that a really supportive provider for you? And maybe it's just a conversation of like, do you start to then interview some other providers that are more open to like even asking like, well, why are you interested in that marker? What would that tell you that you're curious about? And then a full thyroid panel. So I'll run through them if any, like, get a pen if anyone wants to write these down.
Get your notebooks out.
Like totally. Like you didn't know you were coming to class today. But it's a TSH. So that's that brain to thyroid is like that first one that many of us might have. And we're looking for like, we want anywhere like below a 2.5 is typically functional medicine. Then we want to see how's the thyroid communicating with the body. So that's a couple markers. We got free T4. That's our inactive hormone. We got free T3. That's our active hormone. And then we want to look at the antibodies. So that's TPO and TG to see if there are any autoimmune pieces of this. Those would be, I guess those are like those are not certainly the bare bones to call them that. That would be a really nice thyroid panel. There are more we can add on to that. But if you're just going to your PCP, like that's a good information right there.
Yeah. When I first started this journey for myself, I remember going to my PCP and I was like, is it okay if I ask for a couple, additional tests in my labs? And she sort of looked at me sideways a little bit. And I had told her, I was starting to explore this and, I thought it would just be helpful. And she was just so sweet and like actually went through with me and was like, okay, what do you want me to check off on this thing, which is like great. Obviously, it's a little disappointing when you find out that then, insurance doesn't cover certain things, which just seems a little ridiculous. But when I was going through this, it's so funny how many times to me she had in the past mentioned my thyroid because I've talked about this on the show before, but like my weight's like sort of fluctuated, especially since I've had celiac. Like I noticed like times where I like have maybe eaten celiac when I shouldn't have, and I'll notice it affects my weight. But like I've been, trying to do more and more to be good and to listen to my body. And so I had lost some weight and she would ask me about my thyroid all the time. And then, she would do the TSH and it would come back normal and she'd be like, oh yeah, I guess you're fine. And truth be told, like I am fine, of course. But for somebody that was so curious about my thyroid, never had looked into any of those other markers, which is just like, that seems counterintuitive to me. You're curious about this, you're concerned about this, but there was these other tests underneath it that you could have looked into. And if there was a problem, maybe would have helped, get to the solution, right? But you didn't. And that's just one of those like main differences. When it comes to the hormone stuff too, I do want to ask you because I know a lot of women are on birth control and that will impact whether or not they can really get a fair assessment with their hormones, right? I know when I first started having these conversations, she had said to me, you need to be off of your birth control for a couple months before we can even really do that because right now it's going to look like you're on menopause and I'm not going to be able to get a fair assessment of what your hormones are doing, and then it needs to take time to sort of regulate. So if someone is on a hormone birth control, and they're planning on getting off to kind of start looking into this, what's that window of time that they need before they can really get some accurate reads on these tests?
Yeah. So typically I would want to see like 3 months or longer to say like, all right, we've got, because that's really 3 months is kind of like when we're getting those like kind of hormones, like full expression.
Yeah.
And really that like part of that is like if you're also going to explore kind of taking yourself off of birth control, like there's a lot that you can do to support yourself to do that more gracefully. And I think if you're even if you're on birth control, I would say the first place that we want to start for hormones is actually looking at your adrenals. So those are the organs that sit on top of your kidneys and your low back that are like our stress organs. We could kind of, they have much greater roles in the body than just that, but like we could call them just our stress organs, produce cortisol. Cortisol is a master hormone. So, he's the puppeteer that's going to kind of play everybody under him. And if he's out of whack, that's often where we can see dysregulation in some of our other kind of hormones, be it birth control or not. So it's kind of like if you're someone that's listening to this and you're like, oh my God, like that's such a big thing that I would have to do to like help my hormones. It's like, what could I start doing right now? Right. And then like maybe toe in the water, like from the shallow end, walk on in. It's like, all right, we can look at your cortisol. That's typically a urine or saliva test. There's a company called Dutch that's kind of the and greatest in functional medicine world for like looking at hormones, and they're, you know, you can actually get urine tests for both your adrenals as well as your kind of comprehensive hormone panels. But thinking of too, like, I think part of this conversation is really like our informed consent about birth control.
Yeah.
Which for many of us didn't happen.
Nope.
And it's crazy. And that's, you know, that fundamentally is a big divide between conventional medicine and functional medicine, is like, we just want to know like what's happening in our body and like what are we doing to our body and what's being done to our body. And the biggest question of, you know, why were you put, especially if you were at a young age, like why did you put yourself on birth control, or why were you put on birth control? Was it for your skin? Because that's, you know, there are many other ways for us to support that. Was it for raging PMS, or was it for like, there are solutions that, or, you know, lifestyle nutrition and even some like targeted supplements that can really help for you to actually reclaim your body and have a cycle that feels really supportive.
Yeah.